This week on the show, we sit down with an interview with Jordan Hubbard, one of the founders of the FreeBSD project and the one who invented ports and sysinstall and insert, piece of FreeBSD here. So later in the show, we'll be showing you some new updates to the OpenBSD router tutorial we did a few weeks ago, kind of a 2.0 version, if you will. We've also got some news, your questions, and even our first viewer-submitted video. So this is all going to be right here this week on BSD Now, the place to be, SD. BSD Now, episode 13, Bridging the Gap, recorded November 27th, 2013. Hi, I'm your host, Chris Moore.
And I'm Alan Jude.
Hey, good to have you guys with us this week. Really looking forward to a fun show on today, the eve before Thanksgiving. But before we get into any of that and let you get away to your festivities, we want to first start with some of this week's headlines. So what's up first, Alan?
We have yet another Getting to Know Your Port Manager team.
Okay.
So this week's interview is with Erwin Lansing, who's main member of the team, and is also known as the annoying reminder guy.
Grr.
Yep. And other than Joe Marcus Clark, he's the longest-serving member of the Ports Manager team.
Mm-hmm. He's also a vice president of the FreeBSD Foundation, so
yes,
that's pretty cool. Hopefully some of that comes up in the interview. But in addition, it looks like he maintains the .dk top-level domain stuff.
Yes, so that's quite a responsibility, an entire country TLD.
Mm-hmm. So one of the money quotes from this, it says here that he describes FreeBSD as the best well-hidden success story in operating systems, by now in the hands of more people than one can count and used by even more people, and not one of them knows it. Can we say PS4 or various appliances?
Yep.
It's not only the best operating system currently around, but also the most supportive and inspiring community. So that's really cool.
Yep.
Good quote from that one.
And it looks like, as far as his inspiration for using FreeBSD, he says it's quite the usual story. It went from Slackware to Red Hat to Debian to Gentoo to FreeBSD. And then after starting a web hosting startup, he never looked back.
That's funny. We hear a lot of that where they always try all the other distros and then end up landing on FreeBSD. Like, okay, I'm set now.
I started straight with FreeBSD, and then every time you looked at a Linux, it was like, well, that's not as nice. Why would I do that?
Yeah. Well, see, my FreeBSD was I started there at the ISP, went to college, and got corrupted by everyone handing out Red Hat disks and whatnot, and ran it for a year, and then was like, dude, this just stinks. I'm going back to FreeBSD.
Right. Well, mine was a shell account, and it happened to be FreeBSD, and so that's everything I knew. And then when I went to college, they're like, well, this is Red Hat. I'm like, yeah, but I already use BSD.
Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
The Red Hat classes helped me a bit because I did some consulting with people that had Red Hat, and I needed to know enough about Red Hat to convert all their stuff to FreeBSD.
Yep. Well, that's cool. Yep. Looks like the one they got coming up next week is with Martin Wilkie, MeWe.
Yes.
And he's actually used to be my mentor for the ports commit that I have.
He was actually the guy that helped me get my first port in as well.
Oh, very cool.
I'm not a committer yet.
Yeah.
But, so his is up as well, so we have to link to that.
Okay.
And
very cool.
Explains how he got started. He joined Port Manager in 2009. He's got his story about how he started using FreeBSD is so long it's in his blog instead of in the article.
Yep. Well, his nickname was the MeWe bot. And,
yes.
He just have these massive commits. And like, okay,
so
he just
commits.
Updated 800 ports an hour ago. Oh, okay.
Well, yeah, there's a
machine.
The Ports Manager guys have this website that shows like commits over time by people, and he's just like, he was in the top 5 every month for a long time.
Yeah. MeWe's awesome. But yeah, cool. So definitely go check that out.
He says what keeps him motivated in FreeBSD is still the community.
Oh, that's very cool. I don't think I've met him in person. Last I heard, he was in Malaysia.
I think so, yes.
But, okay. Yeah, he's German though.
Yeah.
So he ended up moving out there for a job. But that's very cool. Hopefully we'll get him out to an Asia BSD Con one of these years.
Yeah. And he says, what book do you have on your bedside table? And he says, book? Can I eat that?
Good times.
So next up,
we have VBSDCon. We have wrap-up compilations of, I guess, various groups' experience at the most recent VBSDCon out in Virginia.
Yeah,
that was the one hosted by VeriSign.
About a month ago now, and so we've collected all of the different articles people have put up about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess first up we have stuff from the OpenBSD guys. Next, we have a link for FreeBSD's perspective, and then RootBSD.
Yeah, the FreeBSD Foundation sponsors some people to go, so they have the trip reports from those individual people. Yeah,
very interesting reads. And in addition, RootBSD was there, and our company, IX Systems, or my company, IX Systems, wrote up a write-up as well, and I think maybe some of my stuff might have been in that. Yeah. But and then, of course, from VeriSign, who hosted it.
Yeah, they have a thing on their own blog. And actually, the blog that's the main article here is the personal blog of one of the guys that ran the conference. So there's quite a bit of stuff in there. And, of course, we added a link to our wrap-up of it, which actually doesn't appear to be on this blog. I'll have to poke Rick about that.
Yeah, definitely link him to it, because we talked about it back in episode 9.
Yeah, so like as soon as we got home.
Yeah, go back and check it out. We'll give you, that was kind of like an instant recap of the event.
Yep. So. And I think they have all the slides up on the website now as well. So if there was any of the talks, and the BSD Talk podcast has published some of their stuff from it. They have recordings of some of the talks, audio only, but still. And they had the interview with me. We covered that last week, and lots of good stuff.
All right, very cool. So next up, we have a Faces of FreeBSD interview. I guess they're doing these weekly as well. And this week, they talked to Gabor Pali from Hungary.
Yes. I met him at EuroBSDCon because he was running the Dev Summit there.
Yeah, he's always involved with the Dev Summit.
Yeah, it says I've been in. It's talks about it in the interview here that I think it was a couple of years ago. In 2010, he took over running the Dev Summits. So he's run the ones in Germany, the Netherlands, Poland, and Malta. Okay, and as well, he runs his own event called BSD Day, which has been in Hungary, Slovakia, Austria, and Italy.
Okay. That's pretty cool. Wonder if maybe one of these years he'll sponsor a EuroBSDCon out there.
Yeah.
Poke, poke, nudge, nudge.
Well, actually, cool. Isn't that where it is next year?
Where are we? We're in Bulgaria next year.
We're in Bulgaria. Never mind. Okay.
Yeah, Sofia.
Yeah.
But maybe in the future, we'll get out to Hungary.
And he's also the secretary for the FreeBSD core team since 2012. So he maintains the agenda, organizes the meeting, and reminds people that they're supposed to do certain things.
Sure.
And he also manages the quarterly status reports, which is kind of collecting all of the things that are happening and things that are finished and things that are in progress, and getting that report out there. And that report's always a very interesting read, because it even finds the stuff that you can't find just from reading SVN logs and stuff.
Well, a couple notables in the article here. It talks about his past as a video game programmer and how it got involved with FreeBSD. So that's actually a really interesting thing to see somebody coming from the video game world and then moving into FreeBSD.
Actually, we're trying to get an interview with someone about that topic, someone that works at a online game hosting service.
Oh, okay.
They host dedicated servers for games and stuff, and they actually use FreeBSD to host all the games.
What kind of games are they hosting? Is it like Steam stuff? Or?
Yeah, and like Battlefield and Call of Duty and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, nice.
I used to run all my servers for those on BSD as well.
Yep. We ran a couple TF2 servers here for a while.
I had a CS Source for a long time. Call of Duty 4, etc.
Oh, very cool. Yeah. I mean, that was the easiest way for me to run it back in the day. Linux emulation, even though we were using the Steam binaries, it just ran well.
Exactly. I ran all kinds of servers.
Okay. So next up, we have some release news this week. Dragonfly BSD 3.6. I got to look a little closer. Was just released.
Yep. So this has
some of the notables.
All the stuff we talked about in our interview with Justin Sherrill is all in here. And
well, to recap some of that, it's like dports is now the default instead of package source.
Right. So that's their version of FreeBSD ports, and it uses Poudre to build it all. They've been working on that extensively. So they have the same kind of binary packages.
In addition, they've added a bunch of big SMP scaling improvements to this release.
Yeah, there was a post by Matthew Dillon about it on Slashdot. He, in a comment on the news story, he explained answered a bunch of questions people had about it.
Sure.
I'll grab the link for that and throw it in the show notes as well if you're curious about exactly what has changed.
Well, that's cool. In addition, I guess they pulled this from FreeBSD, the experimental i915 and KMS support for Intel video chipsets.
And the ATI.
Oh, they did ATI as well?
Yep.
Okay, well, excellent. I like saying ATI, but man, I know it's AMD now. I just forgive us.
Yes, ATI was Canadian.
Yes, ATI still has a special place in our heart. It's hard for me to say AMD. Anyway, but yeah, ATI AMD support has been pulled over, so that's there. And of course, we have the link to Justin Sherrill if you want to hear a little bit more about it, which I think was about an hour long. So it was a very thorough interview.
Yes.
Okay, and last up for the news this week, we have a kind of a heads up for you guys, anybody running FreeBSD current. There was a bug recently discovered with ZFS on SSDs with trim enabled. Basically, do not upgrade to or past revision 258632 if you're running on SSDs with ZFS and trims on and all that. It could result in data loss, so bad bug. They're still looking at it. I don't think they have a fix posted yet, but hopefully something soon.
So they imported some new stuff from Illumos. It was sponsored by Hybrid Cluster, which is a company that builds something on top of FreeBSD using ZFS. And so they wanted this feature brought in. And during the merge, it seems a bug was introduced. And
something went sideways. Yeah.
I expect that to be fixed pretty soon. But if you are, if you haven't upgraded yet, don't. And if you have built New World based on something newer than 258632, you should disable trim immediately using the sysctl. I don't remember if that's read-only or not. You might have to add it to loader.conf from reboot to actually turn it off. And then you should roll back to a previous kernel and then scrub your pool and make sure there isn't any data that got trimmed when it shouldn't have.
Yep, and I'm sure I guess it's expected shortly. I'm sure that'll be out here pretty soon.
Yeah.
Something
it won't stay
that bad usually gets fixed fast.
It'll either get reverted or fixed very shortly.
Okay, and that's our wrap up for the weekly news items. Next up, we're going to be playing an interview that we did with Jordan Hubbard, one of the FreeBSD founders back in the day. Yep. We recorded this back in Malta at EuroBSDCon a couple months back.
Yeah.
So I hope you enjoyed the interview.
It was a while ago. He kept asking us, when are you going to play that? So we're going to get to that
Well,
now.
we finally got to it today, Jordan. So next up, Jordan Hubbard, and we'll join you guys after the break.
So this week we're joined by Jordan Hubbard, one of the co-founders of FreeBSD and now the CTO at IX Systems. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, it's great to have you with us.
Pleasure to be here.
Yes. So getting us started, let's just give a little bit of your background. When did you get first involved with FreeBSD? What was the story that brought you to that point?
Oh my, that's kind of a long story.
Those are the best ones. People enjoy hearing the history behind this.
I think really my story starts more with Unix, which in the very early days obviously was owned by AT&T, and even if you use the Berkeley variant, you still had to have an AT&T source license. So I pretty much just used Unix at work. It was something you needed a full-on workstation to be able to use, and if you wanted to hack on it, well, you needed to be lucky enough to work for one of those companies that actually had a source license. And you had to justify having a source license. It wasn't just something you could buy over the counter.
It wasn't cheap, I imagine.
No, it wasn't cheap, but again, it was kind of exclusive, right? So the only people hacking on Unix at all were a very small set of academics and very specific companies. And of course, to even get a Unix-capable workstation, Motorola 68020 or something, was they were started at $10,000 and went up from there. So most of us used Unix on the VAX, and that, of course, we didn't have one of those at home, though I treated it that.
Sure. Someday there'll be a VAX in every house.
Yeah, exactly. I'll have my own 780 and three-phase power, but that never quite happened, and I couldn't afford a $15,000 workstation. So when the first 386s came out and actually supported demand paging, and the Intel architecture kind of came up to the point to where you could realistically run a Unix on it, I started using something called Lights, which was based on Mach 3.0 and a Unix single server, BSD Unix single server based on BSD 4.2. And again, you needed a source license to be involved with it, but the company in Germany that I worked for had the source license. So we were sort of loosely collaborating on this Mach/Lights operating system running the 386. So that to me was like a revelation. For the first time, you could actually run Unix on your desk at home. Without schlepping a workstation from work out the back door while the security wasn't working. So that to me was like, wow, this is actually about this could go mainstream. Or you could actually have Unix in the hands of the everyday hacker. But of course, we needed the source license still. So Bill Jolitz at Berkeley, and was also working for a company called Symmetric at the time, wrote the missing pieces. So Berkeley was releasing something called a light distribution of BSD, which was all the bits that weren't encumbered by AT&T. That they could ship, but it wasn't a complete operating system. You couldn't boot it. The low core and all the the architecture-specific things for Intel weren't there. So Bill with 386 BSD actually wrote the missing pieces and created the first standalone distribution that you can install off of floppies on your 386 or 486. And when that first came out, the 0.1 release, we all jumped on that like, wow, that's interesting. And it wasn't based on Mach; it was a monolithic kernel, but we were willing to overlook that. We were kind of Mach fans at the time. Kind of ironic. But back in the 80s, as this was, and so we got the first versions of 386 BSD going, and just the fact that it booted, the fact that you could get it to a shell prompt was spectacular. This was finally Unix running on your PC, and I started maintaining a set of patches for it. And this was the 386 patch kit that Nate Williams and Rod Grimes and I were all. Terry was also a maintainer of it for a while. It sort of went from hand to hand. It would accumulate a few hundred more patches, and someone would say, "Oh God, this is really kind of a pain to maintain this," and stop doing it. And somebody else like me would say, "I'm masochistic enough. I'll take it a little further." And we'd maintain this patch kit for a while. And I think we probably had several thousand patches towards the end. And the patch kit would apply itself after you installed the base distribution. And so you install 386 BSD 0.1, and then you install the patch kit, and patch all these things up into and fix all the bugs and get it more usable. And obviously that was increasingly untenable as the patches proliferated, but we kind of had a little bit of a falling out with Bill kind of around that time too, because I think he kind of saw that we were sort of taking it away from him to a certain extent. It was starting to change its identity under the aegis of the patch kit, because there's so many modifications being made, and we didn't want to do that. So that's when the three of us, Nate, Rod, and I, decided, we should do something different. Use this as a starting point. And David Greenman came up with the name FreeBSD, and we liked the fact that it was kind of rolled off the tongue. And so we started that project. And I think
was appending the free to that in response to it not being free previously, or
because obviously you need the whole source license thing, and so we worked away for I think probably another 6 or 7 months. Now that we had a new identity and a group of people were all fired up at this idea of creating this new distribution, and we did FreeBSD 1.0, and at that time everyone was lucky to have a 2400 baud connection to the internet. So I went looking around to find some way of getting the release media into people's hands more conveniently and quickly, and I went to my bookshelf and I had a whole bunch of CD-ROM titles for the Amiga, because I was an Amiga fanatic around that time too, like most of us living in Europe were. And this little company called Walnut Creek CD-ROM made the Aminet CD. I still remember it. It was really nice. It had nice artwork on it, and, actual description on the back. And I looked at at that and said, I should call these people up. So I called them from Ireland, where I lived at the time, and I got some guy named Jack on the phone, and to their credit, they didn't just hang up. Like, who are you and why are you calling us? It was like, what have you got? Yeah, I've got this BSD operating system, and we're just about to do our first release of it, and would you be interested in pressing it on CD and maybe making it available somehow? You can sell it, and we don't want any of the money. We just want it out there. We just want it out there, and they said, sure, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, good deal for them, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, actually at that time it wasn't manifestly a good deal for anybody.
Sure.
I mean, we're just this weird name to them.
Right.
We had no idea.
CD was a pretty involved process.
Exactly. I mean, the CD-ROM burners cost tens of thousands of dollars.
So a production run would have been a big risk.
Then you had to go and actually spend the dollar per CD or whatever it cost to press them, to do the master. So it was actually quite a leap of faith on their part, but they did it, and I remember the first box, they sent me a complimentary box of like 300 CDs and international mail, and wrapped it and looked at it. Wow, we got the BSD Demon. We got John Lasseter's permission to put the Demon on the cover, because he was the one who owned the Demon artwork, and Kirk McCusick kind of got involved to mediate that permission process, because he owned the Demon copyright, I believe. And so we were really chuffed to actually see a tangible, installable product. And what was, I think, amazing to us was how quickly it took off, how much people were interested in it, and how much, probably amazing to them as well, how many copies they sold.
Sure.
And I think we did 1.1. About 6 months later, I could have the time going off. That was a while back.
20 years ago.
And that was doing really well. And our relationship with Wannacry CD-ROM started. He got even more cordial. We're like, hey, you guys are onto something here. And they had already employed Rod to come in and redo their infrastructure, because he was a hardware guy, and so he ran Ethernet cables in their offices and built PCs for them, and which they just needed for their operations. And they asked me if I'd be willing to come to the U.S. and come back to the U.S., because that's where I came from. And I said, I'm kind of doing a lot of contract work here in Ireland, and it's starting to kind of wind up a little bit, and I could see maybe doing that. They offered to pay for my moving expenses back, which was kind of a conundrum for me at the time. I was trying to figure out how I was going to best do that, because I was spending like $1,000 a month just on my internet connection in Ireland to do FreeBSD, which was coming out of my own pocket. And so then stepping up and saying, we'll move you back to the US. Pretty much made up my mind, and I went on to work for Wannacry CD-ROM for the next 3 years, I guess. Wow. Doing and became the release engineer for FreeBSD, and ultimately kind of one of the figureheads. We did a number of releases for them. I can't remember what the last CD-ROM release we did at Wannacry was, but I remember I still got a little plaque for doing 2.0.5 that they presented me with. The only plaque I ever got. They didn't do it for every release, and we did lots of them, but they decided to commemorate that one for whatever reason. So and I've still got all the FreeBSD CDs going back to 1.0. I've got a little shelf of all the distributions,
all the history.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really cool.
Yeah. So I can't bear them to throw them away.
No, those will end up in a museum someday. You got to keep those.
So
what were people really doing with it at that point? When people bought it, what were they running on it primarily?
Web servers, mail servers, a lot of
ISP.
We had a lot of small mom and pop ISPs, because of course the internet was taking off at that time, and a lot of ISPs were selling dial-up. And so, we used to jokingly refer to them as 20 modems nailed to a board ISPs, because that's literally what they were.
It sounds like my first job in '95. I started this little dial-up ISP with just a rack of modems in the back, and they sat me at a terminal and said, "Here's your login." I'm like, I don't only run Windows at this point. I'm like, okay, what is this? I remember the sysadmin coming out, we only run FreeBSD here, and that's the only thing you should run at an ISP. So it was like, that was my first introduction. Here's your Pine and Pico client. Have fun, answer the phones.
Cool.
But I remember that. That was
and we were well entrenched in the small and even larger ISP market. I mean, even which are sort of the best internets in San Francisco, which Matt Nolan founded.
Sure.
Running FreeBSD, and so yeah, I mean, I went from sort of release engineer and chief bottle washer and whatnot to kind of just being a jack of all trades for the project. I wrote the first sysinstall and then the ports collection and the package tools. I think actually the package tools first, and then I did the ports collection second. Or maybe I can't remember which order it was in, but then I had to kind of make them.
talk me through.
Kind of an impedance matching layer I had to write because I conceived of them separately. I don't really quite remember the order. They were pretty close together because I conceived all this third-party software needed wrangling, and so I got it up to maybe I got the ports collection up to maybe 300 ports.
Sure.
And said, okay, I've proved what I came to prove, and I'll move on to something else. And
did you ever envision it getting 25,000 ports?
No, never in my wildest dreams. In fact, I remember handing it off to Satoshi Asami, and it was at 300 ports. Going, this has got to be too much to maintain for me. I need someone to step in and do this while I work on sysinstall and some other bits of software here and there, and do release engineering and making the CDs for CD-ROM. And so he picked it up and ran with it for a few years. So, Satoshi, if you're out there somewhere, we miss you. We wonder where you are. Your name is still mentioned fondly. So yeah, there were a lot of early sort of core people, and that's actually where the core team concept kind of came from. And it was very much by invitation only, where we would see David and Nate and Rod and myself would kind of spot somebody who seemed to be of similar inclinations and wanted the same things for the project. And in the earliest days, our mountain to climb that we were really aiming for was the server room. We wanted to be the choice operating system for the sort of the back room scenarios.
Do you feel that's been achieved?
Yes. Yes. I think
all our servers.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of competition there now as well.
Sure.
But when I left Apple in 2001, it was largely because I felt, all right, I think we did it. We pulled it off. We're in some really huge deployments, tens of thousands of servers, and so that's when I decided I wanted to look at the desktop and. Not Planet, but subsequently mobile. And because those were new green fields to go after. But certainly, in the early days, it was all about the server room and becoming the backroom solution of choice. Cool. So we've got a little noise here in the background.
So you had mentioned that you left for Apple and now you're back. So what made you decide to come back to working on BSD?
Matt couldn't have talked yet. I mean, what happened?
Yeah, I know. I mean, as I said in that Wired article, it really was just time to do something different. After 12 years, working in one technology space, you start to kind of think, all right, am I going to do this for the rest of my life? Or, and I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm incredibly proud of what was achieved at Apple and what BSD achieved there. I mean, when I first came to the company, I think FreeBSD 3.2 was the sort of the BSD reference platform, and they created a group for me called the BSD Technology Group. And so we started refreshing that stack and bringing newer versions of the FreeBSD code into OS 10. And what we subsequently achieved there in terms of the market penetration and bringing the Mac back, to be not just a tiny fraction of the market, but a real force to be reckoned with was amazing. And I think for me, one of those moments that I'll always remember is being at the Louvre in Paris and looking at IMP's pyramid and checking it out, looking at all the architecture in there, and turning around and seeing an Apple Store.
Right.
reflected right in the pyramid with the big windows. Wow, we're in the Louvre? Oh my gosh.
Wow.
Okay, we've arrived. Right, and I went in there and talked to them. Like, oh, you're from Cupertino. They were really proud of the store and showed me around. And so, to have that kind of impact, to have BSD make that kind of impact on the world at that scale is just unprecedented.
Sure.
But again, 12 years is a long time to do anything. And also, I think I kind of, to a certain extent, worked myself out of a job. I was a second line manager, so I had managers that I managed, and they were all really good at their jobs. And, I had took some time to get all the groups to the point to where I was really happy with the structure and the management and the engineers working in the various groups that I was second line manager for. And the problem with that role is after a while, if the folks that work for you are really good, you're kind of
left with nothing to do.
Yeah, what do I do now? I kind of oversee this. I sit in a lot of meetings. I strategize.
Did you want to get back to the keyboard, as it were? Is that kind of the...
Yeah, there was definitely an element of that, and definitely, I like managing engineers directly most of all. I mean, I didn't mind the second line management role, but I really, I think where my heart is in being able to really get down to the technology and review the APIs and why is that function named that way?
Able to have an impact on the code directly and say I helped implement that or design that or.
Right. I mean, I don't really code anymore, and I think that even happened to me back in the FreeBSD days when I realized if I could spend each day either working on code and trying to figure out how to debug it and make it do what it was supposed to do versus what it was actually doing at the moment, or I could send out maybe 50 emails and get 5, 6, 7 other people to work more on this particular project or that particular project, or actually understand what the mission goals even were.
Sure.
And actually, I think in FreeBSD is where I really became a manager, not by choice or design, but just by side effect.
Sure.
I checked my mailbox at one point in the late 90s, and I was shocked to realize I was sending about 400 emails a day and reading about 2,000.
Oh man!
And I'm like, really? Oh my gosh! And I didn't believe it at first. And I went and did some stats, and no, really, the numbers don't lie.
Yeah.
And just in sending those emails and providing that continuous push. Hey, how's that going? Hey, what's up with that? And answering questions and mentoring people. A lot of the people that came into the project then were fresh out of high school or even in high school, and I'm very proud, pleased to say that a number of them are now senior FreeBSD leaders and the old men of the project.
Yeah, right.
Which of course makes me feel even older, but
it helps you don't look it, right? So.
Thanks. I am old, but I don't, and I feel old, but I guess I don't look old.
Cool. Any other questions?
So now that you're back working with FreeBSD and stuff, do you have any specific goals and things you'd like to see happen in the next year or so?
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm trying to take it slow. I think I have been gone for 12 years and behind the corporate firewall, so to speak, and so that's put me out of touch. I mean, I've been so busy every day just doing Apple stuff that I haven't really had a chance to watch what the project does on a day-to-day basis. I long unsubscribed from all the mail lists. I just didn't have time to read it anymore. Why receive mail that you just delete? And I retired my commit-bit. It's in safekeeping. Apparently it's in a special vault with a little red velvet ribbon on it, and I can have it back whenever I want it. I'll probably have to get a mentor to show me how to commit stuff to FreeBSD now.
All this subversion stuff. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Can you write me a CBS wrapper?
Right.
I use subversion a lot. But yeah, I mean, I have to relearn how the project works these days and who's doing what.
Get caught up to where it is.
Exactly. Catch back up again, and also make sure that what I'm interested in and that the project is interested in are congruent and that we're on the same page. I don't want to rush in and make a bunch of ill-advised suggestions or requests. And I think at IX we do have the blessing of being able to kind of do very appliance-centric things off on our own branch, and then periodically push stuff up the stream back into FreeBSD. So I can get a lot of useful things done just polishing up the FreeNAS and TrueNAS products. And while I'm doing that polishing and whatnot, learn what's going on in the FreeBSD space at the same time. So I'm not in any real hurry, but I think this coming decade, or the decade we're already in, is definitely the year of the decade of the appliance. I'm seeing a lot of more consumer-focused things, and not just phones and personal, laptops and whatnot, but mission-specific things that you don't even realize are running BSD. I mean, having the PlayStation run BSD.
PlayStation, Panasonic TV, I've heard.
Exactly,
it's kind of under the hood in a lot of places. You would think.
Here, Samsung TVs have got a Unix operating system in there. I'm not sure which one. Could be BSD. But again, most consumers, I think I would argue all consumers, have no idea. It's just a thing. You wave your hand in front of the camera, and it pans between the current television shows, and you need a powerful operating system in those appliances to do the network traffic and to run multiple processes that are cooperating to put up the UI and do the back end downloading of content and all of that. So I think this is a wonderful opportunity now for FreeBSD. I think in particular because of the license.
The license, the stability, the long-term support.
Right. It's got a pedigree, right? I mean, it's 20 years old. It's been refined over decades, literally, and it has again a very commercially friendly license, so people can take it, they can embed it, they can do whatever they want with it. They don't have to release source code, and most companies actually aren't terribly averse to releasing source code that is generic.
Sure, exactly.
They've just made some small changes here and there too. They're always worried about the cross-contamination. This is the piece that isn't generic and where we put a lot of time and money. But the relationships are a little fuzzy now, and so they need a license where they can just say, you know what, this part's closed.
You don't want to have to spend all your money on lawyers to tell if you're in compliance with something.
Exactly.
It's money you don't get back. That could have been put towards so many other things.
Like fixing.
Improving your product.
Exactly. And so being able to just cherry pick the fixes out selectively and say, okay, well, that's clearly okay, that's good, that little chunk of code over there.
And every bit that you can send back to the project gets maintained for you and makes your delta that much smaller when it's time to revision.
And I think it's actually, it's very heartening that we started the FreeBSD project talking very much about the BSD license. I mean, it's in why we do what we do. I think I wrote one of the original about pages on the FreeBSD.org website that said we wouldn't mind a little remuneration for what we do, but we don't want any strings attached. We think that code that's used in the widest number of situations and does the most good is the code that we want to run. I'm paraphrasing, but
the developers measure their success not by how much money they make, but how many people use the code they wrote.
Right. How much of an impact they're having, how much, without sounding too highfalutin, how much change they're having, or how much positive effect they're having on society. And so I think that's where the BSD license has always shined, and what attracted us all to it was we don't want a wall of legal text that defends the right of people to have this code. We want it to be given freely. We want that to be something that you make that moral choice or commercial choice about, and in some cases you'll choose not to because it doesn't make sense. In other cases you will, but we want that to be your choice as a user of the code.
And hopefully it's something you can just look at and figure out without having to go to a lawyer.
Exactly. The BSD license is 2 sentences.
And it's gotten smaller over time. At conferences, it's always been a lot of fun where I compare, this is our license and it's gotten shorter. This is the Linux licenses, and they're getting longer as time goes on.
I was so happy when the 4th clause of the BSD license went over. Yes, we lost a clause.
We lost a clause, right? That's a good thing to us.
Absolutely.
We made it simpler.
And I don't want to get too controversial here, but I think the GPL v3 has had real mixed effects on the commercial world. A lot of companies are now saying,
maybe that's
this is downright scary. Right? Our lawyers are not pleased about this. And yes, the Linux kernel is still GPL v2, and I think that's a very smart decision on Linus's part, but there's other stuff,
other components technology, you need,
which is GPL v3, and now they're actually a lot of the commercial world is running scared from that, and so that's a great opportunity for us, where we come in with a much simpler story, and I think again having people contribute to the code because they want to and because it makes sense to has always been for us the higher order motivation.
Sure.
If that's the case, then nothing else really matters.
Fantastic. That's been a great interview. I think we've probably used up just about all the time we have for this.
Yeah. Thanks. Yes.
But thank you so much for being here,
This
Jordan.
concludes this episode of Between Two Hackers.
All right. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you all next week. Next up, we have a tutorial we're going to be showing you guys today, and this is actually kind of a remix of a tutorial we did a few weeks ago on building an OpenBSD router. We're calling it Part 2, so we've updated our original tutorial with some new stuff. So basically what happened was a few weeks back we showed you how to build a high-performance BSD router on OpenBSD. Since then, a lot of work has been done to clean up and reorganize the tutorial. It's been cut into sections now, also has a new section about power saving in case you're running on a little low power box or a bigger box.
Even a bigger box, but you want to save power.
Save some power. I mean, who doesn't want to, right, if it's on 24/7? So we've updated it to have support for the new switchless operation using virtual Ethernet interface and some bridging magic. Special thanks to Ryan for helping us test this. The updated guide's also going to show you how to do an all-in-one router to replace your consumer one without any additional hardware. And we're also going to showcase some of the extras: email alerts, errata checking script, SSH and Tor tunnels. And the errata script now detects if you're running release stable or current and acts accordingly and can automatically patch your source code and alert you. So go ahead and take it away, Alan.
Yeah, so the idea here is with the original setup, if your machine had more than just the 2 NICs you require, right, one to go out to the internet and one to come in from your LAN, the idea was that you would use the extra NICs to have completely separate LANs. Like here at my house, my routing machine has 3 NICs, so one goes to the internet, one goes upstairs for my home, and then the basement is all the office stuff. And they're on completely isolated networks, so they have to go through the router to talk to each other. But somebody has, I think it was one of the Socris boxes or something, one of the little machines that has 4 or 5 NICs in it, and he wanted to use it to completely replace like an old D-Link. So instead of having to require a switch, he wanted to use the extra NICs as if they were a switch. So we looked at how you would do that. So in this example, our machine has 4 NICs, EM0, 1, 2, and 3. So we'll have EM0 go out to the internet like we did in the tutorial. And in the original tutorial, EM1 was directly connected to a switch that had our clients on it. In this example, instead, we're going to have EM1, 2, and 3 bridged together to act as if that was actually a 3-port switch.
So basically, EM0 is your WAN port, and then the other guys are your LAN 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yeah. And they'll be bridged together so that when packets come in, they can, because they're bridged, the 2 machines can talk to each other without actually having NAT happen. Right? So you don't have to have... normally, when you use the multiple NICs on our original router tutorial, you'd have different subnets for each port. And in this case, you're going to have them all share a subnet instead. So when you create a bridge like that, the problem is the bridge can't actually hold an IP address in OpenBSD. In FreeBSD, I think the bridge can. I'm not sure. Anyway, so we use the vEther device, which is a virtual Ethernet device, and it doesn't do anything except hold the IP address. And so in our bridge here, you see we have the virtual Ethernet, which will have the IP address, and then our 3 ports. We're going to block all non-IP traffic on those 3 ports because we don't want other stuff going through, and then we'll mark it as up. So now, the rest of the tutorial is pretty much the same, except for we'll have the config for the DHCP server. We'll use the vEther0 interface instead of EM1 or whatever, because that's where our IP address is. So once we've applied that, we can see that on our machine we have a bridge, and we have our virtual Ethernet and our 3 ports, and we see that the virtual Ethernet has an IP address.
Okay.
And then all we have to do is add our PF rules. So now we've got our firewall up and running, and our DHCP server is already running. Just restart that quick. This way you can replace, your old commercial off-the-shelf router with one of these little embedded boxes without also having to have separately a switch. Which, if you're constrained on space, if you're going to be sticking this on in a wiring closet or something, Having to have one device instead of two makes a big difference, especially
Definitely. Especially if you have one that has the NICs already. I mean,
right, and also they usually come with big power brick or something, and having to have two of those, and when you're trying to hide it up in the corner of the ceiling or something, it helps a lot if it's smaller.
Yep.
So yeah, that's how you would do that. Basically, using a bridge and the vEther device, you can combine a bunch of ports together as if they were on a switch.
Okay, well, excellent. Well, that was a little quicker this week, but definitely if you go check out the full document, there's a lot of good stuff on there, including the stuff from the original tutorial.
Yep, and like he's mentioned, all the new stuff for automatically checking for updates for OpenBSD and so on.
Okay, very cool. Well, thank you, Alan. Great tutorial. Next up, we'll be going to our weekly news roundup. Next up, we have our weekly news roundup, where we'll quickly go through some of the notables from this last week in the broader BSD community. So first up, we have pfSense version 2.1 is now available on the Amazon EC2 cloud, it looks like. So that's in the, let's see here, the Elastic Compute Cloud EC2, and keeping up the community spirit, they're also offering a free public AMI, so that's pretty cool. And it looks like they have some information in their FAQ and user guide on the site for additional details on how to use it.
Yep, and where to find the AMIs and so on. I'm guessing this is based on Colin Percival's work. I don't know that he ever actually backported much of that to 8, so I imagine that's why they had to do some work to get this to work on EC2.
Yep, definitely. So that's definitely interesting, being able to throw a pfSense up in the cloud. So
yeah, especially useful if you're going to have a bunch of stuff up there.
So that's pretty cool. Next up, we have something about Puffy on the desktop. What's this, Alan?
Yeah, so this is a review over at DistroWatch, where they actually tried out OpenBSD 5.4. And so they went through it and they tried it out. They talk about some of the new features.
Specifically on the desktop, though.
Right, yeah. So using it as a desktop. So, they looked at the support for the BeagleBone and the kernel mode setting and so on, but, they noticed that they have KDE 3.5, GNOME, etc., and they tried it out. They said when they booted it up and they got the text installer, they were a little concerned, but after they went through the install and they had X, it was pretty good from there. And then they have some screenshots of their setup running Firefox, and, it's your full machine, right? So they were quite pleased with it. And they show using the package add system in the binary packages system on OpenBSD. In this case, installing Firefox. They also talk about some of the other software they used, some of the different desktops they tried, like XFCE. It's quite a thorough review of actually using OpenBSD as a desktop.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, definitely take a look at that if it's something you've never tried or are curious about. It's a neat.
But yeah, I guess their conclusion was that most people will see OpenBSD as an operating system for servers and firewalls, but OpenBSD can be used as a desktop environment if the user doesn't mind doing that little bit of manual work to install Firefox and so on. The payoff is a very light, responsive, and a system and a system that's unlikely to ever misbehave.
That's one thing you got to give the OpenBSD guys credit for. Whenever we go to conferences, Euro or whatever, all those guys run it on their laptop, so they tend to keep stuff working.
Yes, there's a lot more dog fooding going on in OpenBSD than FreeBSD. A lot of people like you and I run PCBSD or whatever, but you see quite a few Macs not running FreeBSD.
To purge the evil Apple bane from the FreeBSD community. But one system at a time.
Yep.
So next up, we have some new information about two-factor authentication with SSH. I'll let you take that one, Alan, since I got the PCBSD.
Yep. So this is a kind of a tutorial on using the YubiKey with OpenBSD's SSH. So the important stuff is that, after you do the steps that are detailed in this tutorial, you'll have an SSH server, which you can only establish a connection to once you've authenticated by doing the key pair. That's your normal SSH stuff, entering the passphrase for that key pair, and using the unique one-time password provided by your YubiKey.
Very cool. Next up,
it talks a little bit more about it and, how you can use it to in place of port knocking and so on to actually secure your home SSH or your server or whatever.
Also things like two-factor authentication for like Gmail.
I imagine, yes. There's other tutorials out there for using the Google's two-factor authentication with SSH. So if you already have it set up for Gmail or whatever, you can use that same two-factor system for this. Or this one is the YubiKey, which is a hardware device.
Okay, that's pretty cool.
Which can be more convenient than having to have your phone on you all the time. Depending what you're doing or, depending on your job, there's sometimes you're not allowed to have your phone with you.
Sure.
So this walks through the steps of setting it up using BSD auth and the modifications you have to make to your SSH to make it work. And it kind of all applies together. And Monty Python reference. And then, it sets it up so you can use your YubiKey as the second factor.
Well, it is from a site hosted in the UK, so the Monty Python reference is obligatory.
Yes.
Well, very cool. It sounds like a great article to go read if you want to.
Yeah, if you have a YubiKey or if you're interested in getting one like that so that you can do something like this instead of relying on just the passphrase on your key.
Okay, cool. Well, lastly, for the weekly roundup, we have our, of course, PCBSD weekly digest that we're doing, and let's just recap a little bit of that, and then I'll have some things to add. So, first of all, the 10.0 stuff is still full steam ahead. I think we've hit about 400 PBIs that are in the App Cafe, ready to be used.
That's
I think
quite a
maybe
few.
As of today, I think we may be around 500 now. So we're rapidly approving, testing, getting things out there.
Nice.
Last week, we were merging in GNOME 3, Mate, and Cinnamon desktops into our ports tree. So we've been waiting for those for a while. So I was really excited to work on merging that with Joe Maloney, a new committer of ours. So that's really cool. In addition, I'll just let you guys know we have a little early Thanksgiving present. All those packages actually finished building yesterday. So they are uploading to the CDN now for 10 stable. We'll have new packages for GNOME 3, Mate, and Cinnamon. And in addition, I imported some of the new Linux compat layer CentOS 6 stuff, which brings you Skype 4, among other things. So all that stuff is going out to the mirrors now. I think it'll hit sometime late tonight.
Yes,
and
I can see on the traffic graphic going like this because our 15-minute refresh cycle is so fast that what you upload in the 15 minutes gets sent to an edge in like 30 seconds.
Oh, there you go. There you go. But yeah, it's rolling. I think it's up into the U's now. It's going alphabetical.
Yep.
Once that finishes, I'll upload a new ISO as well. So if you would like to install it fresh, you can do that, and you'll be able to choose GNOME 3, Mate, or Cinnamon right from the GUI installer.
Nice.
So those will be right there. Of course, this does replace GNOME 2. So if you're a GNOME 2 user or diehard, really like it, we recommend you switch to Mate, which is going to be your closest GNOME 2 experience.
Right.
GNOME 2 is going to get removed from the tree once they bring GNOME 3 in because they don't tend to coexist happily.
Right.
But just small heads up for those still using GNOME 2. In addition, our login manager has gotten fixed up a little bit more bugs fixed. It's a lot faster to launch you into your desktop of choice.
Nice.
So that's kind of cool. In addition, we've improved this last week. I spent some time working on our new text installer front end. So we have the new 10 ISO that's going out. It's going to have a new text mode to do installation of either the desktop or the server. So if you want to throw us on a box that you don't particularly want to fire up.
Does that work over serial?
I haven't tried it.
Okay.
It's using Grub to boot. So I would imagine you could make it work. But yeah, it should hopefully. But what I'll do is when you get to the Grub prompt, you'll be able to pick graphical with Visa mode or text mode. And so if you're on a server, you can just pick text mode and boot right in. You don't need a mouse at all.
Cool.
But the cool thing is this last week we added support for doing ZFS dataset options to the text installer. So you can go in after you've set up your disk and picked if you want to use the full disk or partial, whatever. When you go to edit the options for ZFS, it lists all your data set, all via menus. And then you pick a data set like /user or /temp, and then it shows you all the available ZFS options and whether they're set or unset on those. And you can pick an option and turn it on or change the defaults, and it just does it.
Right. Yes, I want more compression or less or whatever.
Yeah. Change the compression type or set no exec on something. I mean, basically, we just pulled all the easily settable variables out of the ZFS and imported those. So it's probably about 85% of them are available via the text installer. Now, the last bits are ones where it's some really weird user settable options. So I have to do some more work on getting the dialogues working for that. But that'll come eventually. So that's in the new 10 installer, 10 ISO that's going out. In addition, I've backported that to 9.2. And we'll be, after all the 10 stuff's uploaded, probably Thanksgiving morning, I will then start uploading the new 9.2 package set along with the new 9.2 ISO that has that stuff. 9.2 does not have GNOME 3 Mate and Cinnamon, so it's still the same desktops. We're not going to change.
It depends on the KMS stuff?
It doesn't depend on KMS. It's just that I don't want in the middle of a release, somebody's running GNOME 2 and then whack, it's gone.
Good point.
When they do an update. So we're merging that in for 10. So people moving to 10, then you have a choice of fresh new desktops. And that just made more sense for us. But that's all stuff that's coming soon to a download near you.
Nice.
So that's the wrap up for the PCBSD news of the week. So next up, we're going to be getting to your feedback and questions. Okay, next up we have our feedback and questions from you, the audience, where we go ahead and try and answer the questions you sent in and where you try and stump us. So first up, we have something from Ben, and he's asking about UEFI booting FreeBSD with GPT and ZFS on root. So he says, first of all, good day from Australia. He's been trying to install FreeBSD 10 Beta 3 or PCBSD 10 stable on a MacBook Pro 7.1. He hasn't found a way to perform a UEFI boot of his ZFS root with GPT. He's trying to dual boot with OFX. He has Refine Boot Manager. He's able to boot into the FreeBSD and PCBSD installers. Got it. Using memory sticks. And then he follows your root on ZFS guide from the wiki. He's tried two different options. He can use the GPR boot code to install the bootloader into the Index 4. Good. And then he has no entry in his Refine menu to load FreeBSD. After he does that, his second option he tried was the PCBSD installer. Created a FAT2 32 EFI system. I think the bottom line here is, though, I don't think the EFI booting is in.
Not yet.
I know it's not in the PCBSD, and it's not in the FreeBSD release either.
Yeah, so it's not actually supported yet.
Yeah. So I guess you're kind of, barking up the wrong tree here at the moment. It's not actually in the system yet. If you go to the wiki.freebsd.org site and just look for UEFI, I think it's just /UEFI, you'll see the details on UEFI support, and I forget who's working on it now. I'll have to check that. But they're working on it. It was a FreeBSD Foundation sponsored project. It just hasn't been merged into the tree yet. But he has a link there to his SVN repo. So if you want to pull it and roll your own FreeBSD ISO, you could then try it and see if you get any farther. That may be the missing link you have here. The PCBSD stuff, we won't import that for a little bit yet. I talked to the developer, and he hasn't finished it up yet, where it'll boot with Grub and other bootloaders. It still does some magic in the FreeBSD loader to kind of force the kernel to work. So he's still got a little bit of cleanup to happen. I don't think it's going to make it into 10. I mean, this is probably going to be a 10.1 feature by the time it gets wrapped up. I think it was Ben O'Rice actually is doing it.
Okay.
But that's kind of what your options are at this point. You'll just need to grab his SVN repo and build it, unless somebody's already thrown an ISO out there for you.
Yeah, it can be kind of tricky if you want to have some EFI operating systems and some not on the same drive.
Yeah. It is, and I think you're doing it on the MacBook too.
Right.
A little tougher.
Yeah, because on most systems you could just disable EFI and boot everything without it. But the Mac specifically is something that only wants to boot with it, right? To get around that on my laptop, I had to use a second drive and put FreeBSD on the second drive instead.
Yeah, so I think, if you try this on PC EFI hardware, your experience may be a little different using his repo. But anyway, take a look at that wiki page. Lots of good information on there. You should hopefully be able to find something to at least point you in the right direction. Okay, next up we have Florian. What did Florian write about here, Alan?
Oops. He was had a question for me. Is asking about managing jailed services from this host system. He said he's not using Puppet because he prefers SaltStack, but he'd appreciate some general tips on configuration management for jailed services, so we can isolate stuff where, with like a web server in PHP or whatever, and so on. And also he said his gateway drug into FreeBSD was ZFS, and which he got addicted to in OpenSolaris, and now FreeBSD is the best way to get it.
Cool.
So for managing jailed services from the host system, there's a couple different things. We use Puppet rather than Salt because Puppet is what I had heard about at the time. So because a jail is just a directory as far as the host system is concerned, it's pretty easy to, modify config files in a jail just by editing the files in the subdirectory, right? I don't know where they are for warden created jails, but for EasyJail, it's user jail's jail name. And so the way we do it is we start with a brand new system on the host hardware, install Puppet or PKG and Puppet using the Bootstrap system, and then let Puppet take over and installs all the other packages we need, including EasyJail. And then it looks, checks, okay, the jail doesn't exist, so it creates the jail with the EasyJail command. Then it drops some files into the jail, like the resolve.conf we need, the package.conf, and so on. Then it uses jexec or EasyJail console commands to bootstrap PKG in the jail. And then the way we do it is we actually install Puppet in the jail and have Puppet in the jail treat the jail as if it was a virtual machine or a separate instance. Although you can do that, you can get away without having to do that. For example, the package command actually has the -j option to allow you to install packages in a jail without having to start a shell in the jail.
Okay.
Basically, it just jexecs into the jail for you. And so you can do that as well. So yeah, we managed some of it, enough to get the jail up and started and get Puppet installed in the jail, and then we just let Puppet in the jail take over. But we could do it all from the host. It would just make our host configs much more complicated. And it would also, we like the separation of having the jails be isolated from the host, as if they were a virtual machine, even though they're just a jail. It will probably simplify things if we move some of those jails to be beehives in the future.
All right, very cool.
So yeah, the nice thing about jails is, like our interview with PHK, is like a two-way mirror, right? You can, from the host you can see in, but from the jail you can't see out. So you can easily drop files into a jail, or make config changes, or
kick services, poke things. Yeah,
using jexec or EasyJail console or whatever, you can run commands inside the jail to make whatever you need to happen.
Yep. Oh, very cool.
Yep.
So I hope he answered your question there. Next up, we have something from Zach, who says, first of all, he likes our router tutorial, so that's cool. He ended up walking away with this with 2 NICs. He can enable gateway. He can then enable DHCP server, and then enable config PF. So he's been using FreeBSD for about 4 years now, so he made some adjustments using the documentation from the FreeBSD docs. Next December, he says he'll be driving with his family for a good long time. When he travels, his trusty Nexus 4 works as everyone's Wi-Fi hotspot. He has an older compact laptop that'll make the trip as well. His goal is to limit the Wi-Fi activity that the phone is mangling and allow a minimum of traffic to hit his data service provider. So it looks like he drew us a little chart here of the phone going to the WLAN, to the laptop, WLAN 1, blah, 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 and then its way down.
Yeah, so he wants to use the laptop basically as a firewall to limit how much data can go over his phone, which doesn't sound like a bad idea.
Definitely, that is really cool. But looks like so far the project includes the Wi-Fi bridge, onboard BWN, run device, DHCPD server, PF, DNS cache, unbound. He's thinking about a Squid cache, maybe XFCE with a media player, media server such as Plex or Xbox Media Center. Wow, you're not ambitious or anything, Zach.
Well, Plex, Plex and XBMC are both in the ports tree now.
They are. That's going to be a lot of setup, so maybe bigger than a tutorial we would do.
Right.
Pretty cool. So he's asking, first of all, if FreeNAS could be used as the base for this project.
I would say no. It's not really designed to be used as a router.
No, because it's based on NanoBSD. If you could do all this stuff in a FreeNAS jail, possibly. I'm not sure.
Right, but just doing the Wi-Fi bridge would be complicated, and I don't think... Does FreeNAS even include the wireless network card drivers? I suppose,
Yeah,
possibly.
I'd have to ask. I don't know off the top of my
Yeah.
head. I mean, I don't know how much they have nano BSD strip out,
Right.
but I don't know. It just seems like maybe not quite the right tool
Right.
for the job here, especially if you're wanting to do like XFCE with a media player, because it's not going to fire up a desktop for you.
Right. There's no Xorg or anything. So yeah, FreeNAS is kind of designed as an appliance. It's meant to do what it's meant to do. It's probably best to use either PCBSD or a vanilla FreeBSD to do something more complicated like this.
Yeah, if you want X, I mean, we have all the packages of Plex and Xbox, Media Center, XFCE, and media players. So it might be easier to start on the desktop than just go turn on your services, set up your bridge, and away you go. Or you could start with FreeBSD and then work your way up to that. Yep. So that's definitely a way to go. Another thing, he had suggestions as to why the Wi-Fi AP WLAN 1 intermittently starts. Where do I even begin looking for this type of data? At this point, I've given up on rc.conf, moved on into writing my own startup script and wait statements that include wait statements. Okay. This more than rarely helps, but not as much as sometimes. Could PF be interfering with DHCP and eventually DNS on WLAN 1? If you've written your own startup scripts, I mean, anything could be happening, I suppose. Do you have any thoughts on that, Alan?
It wouldn't be intermittent. It would either always block it or never block it.
Unless there's some problem with the Wi-Fi delayed, it's not coming up fast enough.
Or something, yeah. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
He gave us lots of detail, but not quite enough to... I'm not really an expert at PF either.
And of course, he mentions that PF rules are incredibly crazy. He speaks 3 languages, but PF is not used by the clients. This could be Imperial code. Oh, gosh. Okay.
Yes.
So he's going to muddle through it, but is there a great place to see some FreeBSD 10 PF rules? Well, they haven't changed from 9 too much, have they?
I think it's under user share examples or something. There are a bunch of examples included, and that the handbook and docs have a lot of other stuff.
This is one of those cases where Google's your friend. If you Google
you just
PF, some problem, usually you'll find a blog entry somewhere where somebody did that.
It's just FreeBSD is still using the older rule syntax. So if you end up on the OpenBSD PF rules, that documentation will be different and it will be confusing.
So that's the one thing to see if the guy did it on FreeBSD specifically. All right. Next up, he says there's very little Unbound documentation available. I feel you there.
Yeah.
But I can't seem to find any example related to FreeBSD to 10 to configure or launch it. Well, I think it's just the client. So
just doing...
It's not bind.
Right. But I think it can do recursive, though, like for a LAN. I'm pretty sure it was almost configured for that out of the box. But if you want to just... if you actually want to run a DNS server rather than just a resolver, you probably just want to install bind out of ports.
Yeah, you just want to grab some other package for that, I believe. I don't think Unbound's quite...
right, it's specifically there because it's very light and doesn't do very much.
Which reduces the number of security vulnerabilities you probably have to
because it's like... I think 20% of all the vulnerabilities ever in FreeBSD from bind. Or some number like that.
Okay. He said he's certain his questions could be answered by Google searches if he knew the right keywords.
Yeah,
so
that is.
I guess the trick is, how do I bridge a Wi-Fi FreeBSD PF or something?
Yeah, but it'll be even hard to go that specific because I don't know that many people have bridged 2 Wi-Fis and tried to filter in between them, right?
That may be worth just asking on the mailing list. You just may have to give up and post something. Say, hey, this is what I'm trying to do. How do I do this? And hopefully you'll get an answer back.
Yeah, most of the stuff looks fine. It just, I guess, his external Wi-Fi adapter, if it's just USB, sometimes those ones have a habit of cutting in.
And there are some bugs in the Wi-Fi drivers too. I've run into problems where, like, my laptop, if I try and send more than a couple gigs of data over an rsync, it like hangs up the firmware and I got to reset the whole thing. It's just pain in the rear. So yeah, there's some firmware bugs out there. It's an Intel on mine, but anyway, you could be running into some issue there. But then again, that's what FreeBSD. If you jump to 10, if you're still having problems, file a bug report if it looks like it's legitimately a bug. Okay. So next up, we have Addison. I'll go ahead and take this one, Alan, so you can get the next one. So Addison says, asking if we have covered this in a previous episode. I was curious if there's anything or any benefit to launch specific applications in their own jail. He's not thinking web servers specifically, more like a jail for Firefox and other for transmission and stuff like that. I get the feeling it would be safer, and I get more paranoid with every episode of TechSnap. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah.
And while creating the jail for applications is something we've covered, he's wondering if there's something as simple as just here's a list of executables that I want to launch in their own jail every time I run the program helper. So I wouldn't say there's anything quite that simple yet. So we have a feature in PCBSD in our Ward, which is our jail management utility. You can go through and create a jail, and when it asks you for the type of jail, we have a couple different things. We have the traditional jail, which is, say, for your Apache or your web server, but we have something special called a port jail, which is probably what you're interested in.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, port jail, what that's going to do for you is that's going to give you a jail, and then it'll mount your home directory into it and /temp so that you can run like X applications, because it needs access to a couple sockets and stuff in there. So it keeps it out of the rest of your base system, and then you can obviously put whatever packages you want in there and stuff, but they will still have access to your home directory, because if you execute Firefox, you're running it as your user, and it's going to want to create stuff in your home directory.
Right, your profile
kind of stink. Profile, yeah, and if you go to save a download, for example, if it throws it into some weird jail directory, that's just a pain in the rear to manage. But that's probably going to be your closest solution. That way, if something goes haywire, the worst they get is your home directory.
Right. You could set something up.
Etsy.
Right. If you wanted to set one up with, Firefox and Flash being a jail, then you can do that by installing those two packages in a ports jail.
Well, that's exactly why we put the ports jail in there, and it's mainly for the paranoid. Also, it's good if you're a developer and you just want to throw stuff in a jail without trashing your existing package setup on your desktop.
If you need to be able to run two conflicting versions of the same app or something.
Correct. So that definitely exists. That may be the easiest solution to what you're looking at doing.
As far as launching every application in its own jail, that'd be more difficult. So jails. Siege root, so you need everything that program needs in a jail. So you couldn't just take something that's already installed on the base system and be like, I want to run that in a jail without separately creating a jail.
Set up the jail. Yeah. But I think he's asking more like, if you just want to create desktop icons, the Warden, if you run Warden, chroot, and then your command, like user local bin Firefox, you can just make a desktop icon for that. Yeah. So when you click it on the desktop, it's doing all the jail stuff in the background.
Right. But you'd have to create a jail for each application you wanted to do this for.
Yeah.
But in general, you could just, group a couple of things together, right? Like,
you could set up one jail and put as many packages in as you want. If you want Firefox and Chrome and Opera all in the same jail, I mean, more power to you.
You want to throw Flash and VLC or whatever other stuff you needed in there, you can do that. Or, if you need to use Java in your browser, then you definitely probably want to have, if you can have your Firefox, Flash, and Java, you can put that in a jail. And if something bad happens, they can't get out of the jail. And that'd be useful. But as far as a separate jail for every single app, that would, really doesn't make any sense.
Tedious after a while.
It just doesn't make sense.
So the Warden has the graphical utilities though too.
Right.
So even if you don't want to dig into the command line, you can just say create a port jail, and then you can browse the package tree right there and say click Firefox, click Java, click Flash,
and
boom, it'll install it. You never really end up touching the command prompt.
Yeah.
So
it's
well, I hope we
very nice and pretty and so on.
Very clickable.
Yes.
All right, and you got Adam up here next.
Yes.
Alan.
So our next question is from Adam. He's a network administrator and a computer science computer security instructor at Alamance Community College in I forget where, somewhere in the States. So he's started watching the Linux Action Show, and then got brought over to TechSnap, and then to BSD Now. And based on our recommendation during a BSD Now episode, he looked at the BSD router project, which is a little different than what we did. In our tutorial, we were doing, replacing that little D-Link or Netgear or whatever you have at home. The BSD router project is meant to replace a Cisco you have at work.
Sure.
So it's, pfSense works really good up to even to like a small business. But if you're doing serious routing, something like
more enterprisey.
And also the nice thing with the BSD router project is it aims to kind of have the command line structure that you'd expect from like a Cisco or a Juniper. So it means that people that are already used to doing this stuff will be able to jump on it and go right ahead. Whereas, pfSense is really geared towards that web UI. And if you're creating a lot of complex rules or something, it's not really what it's for. And so the BSD router project is more along the lines of running BGP or something on your router.
Sure.
So he took a little bit to try setting it up in VirtualBox, and because he knew Cisco iOS and your regular Unix stuff and virtualization, it worked out pretty well. And so what he actually did was made a video of how to do it. So we've included that link in the show notes. We hosted it for him because his college's website couldn't handle all the load if everybody wanted to watch this movie. But it's basically a 16-minute video tutorial on how to set up the BSD router project on VirtualBox so that you can play with it yourself and actually look at, if you need a higher-end type router system instead of just something like pfSense or a little roll your own design to replace.
Sure.
And so if you're trying to replace something bigger than a little off-the-shelf router, like a Cisco or whatever, then this is what that's for. So basically, it's fairly simple. You download the BSD router image, extract it, set up in his case, doing a VirtualBox machine. You boot it up, enter the password. Start up the Quagga, which is the iOS command line clone application. And then you can configure your interfaces. It looks very much as if you were doing it on a Cisco.
Oh, nice.
So you interface, blah, and then set your IP space address, space, blah, and set up your routes. And now you have a replacement for your Cisco. And then you can start setting up your regular Cisco-style ACLs and everything.
Well, that's very cool. Thank you so much for sending us that video, Adam.
And so that's in the show notes if you want to watch that as well.
Okay, great. Well, that's the wrap-up of this week's questions. So, as usual, there's a ton of links in today's show notes, so please go ahead and check them out. You can click them so you don't have to try and remember where we were talking about. All the tutorials are posted in their entirety at bsdnow.tv, so go ahead and check that out. And if you have a question or a comment and want to get something on the show, go ahead and send it on over to feedback@bsdnow.tv. We will monitor that and monitor Reddit,
especially
and all the other places.
If you've done something and you want to have it mentioned on the show, right? It's like we do our best to go out throughout the whole BSD community and find everything interesting people are doing. But if you did something interesting, make sure you tell us, and then we'll definitely make sure it gets on the show.
Something like maybe you wrote a blog article on how to set up. Somebody was asking how to do Wi-Fi bridging. You wrote a blog article on that. Send it over. Maybe we can highlight that for those who are curious.
And that's the other thing. If you have a better answer to somebody's question, Chris and I can only be experts at so many things at a time.
Sure. So definitely please send us stuff in to feedback@bsdnow.tv, although we do try and monitor Twitter as well. So if you want to tweet at us, that's cool. If you have any cool stories about how you or your company uses BSD, interesting things maybe you've done, crazy network stories, cool projects, send that in. We'd love to mention on the show.
Yeah, on TechSnap we used to do these war stories where people tell, how something crazy happened or whatever. Like, the diesel generator at the data center protected by an electric gate. And so when the power was out, they ran out of diesel. They couldn't open the gate to get more diesel in the generator.
Oh, gosh.
But if you have a cool story about BSD, we'd love to read it on the show.
Very cool. And, of course, you can watch live Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern, 1900 UTC. So if you'd like to see how we make the show and all the stuff that happens in between the edited segments you see later, definitely join us live. And of course, as a reminder, the FreeBSD Foundation is doing their big year-end donation push still right now. So even if you can just donate something small, every little bit counts. And if they can even get the total number of donors up, that's a big deal too.
The total number of donors is actually worth at least as much as the money. So even if you can only donate $5 or $10, just do that, get your name on the list, and it helps the foundation keep their tax-free status.
Well, and also it gives them leverage. They go to company X and say, hey, we need this done. And they're like, well, how many people really use that? Well, we have this many.
There's this many thousand people that were willing to pay us to come and nag you. So
so that's good fodder. So definitely donate, even if it's something small. Of course, if you can do something large, that's cool as well. And of course, today's the day before Thanksgiving. So we want to wish you guys all a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy your meals, family time off tomorrow. And of course, we'll be back same time next week.